You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 241. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to today's podcast episode. I am so glad to have you here. If you're listening to this episode the day it goes live, it is December 31st, 2025, the last day of the year. And if that's you, I just want to give you a warm hug, a big celebratory yay. We are at the end of the year. This is really exciting. I love wrapping up one year and stepping into the fresh new year. So I'm just so excited. I'm so excited to be sharing the celebration of this year with you and also welcoming 2026. Now, one of the traditions that I have started, and I started a few years ago, was setting a word of the year. And the reason I do this and I keep doing this is because I love having a theme, something that guides me, something aspirational, so that when I'm facing decisions, when I'm thinking about what to do next, I have a place to go back to. And what I'm going to share with you today is an update. So last year and the year before, but last year in particular, I shared my word of the year. So I'm going to remind you what that word was and update you on how that went. I'm going to share my word of the year for 2026, and I'm going to invite you to create your own word of the year. And in support of that, what I'm planning to do is share a recording of a podcast episode that I recorded previously that takes you through the exercise of choosing a word of the year. So you will have the tools that you need to come up with a word that really encapsulates what it is that you would love to experience in 2026. So let's dive in to 2025. And the word I chose this year was breakthrough. Now, when you listen to the instructions for choosing a word of the year in the podcast episode that will follow in just a few minutes, you'll also know that in addition to picking an aspirational word of the year, so that aspirational word being breakthrough, I also choose a companion word. It might be a shadow word, but it is a word that describes the thing I will need to accept, to feel, to allow for in order to have that more aspirational word. So, for example, when I chose breakthrough last year, I chose a companion word, and that was unanchored, meaning that if what I want is to experience a breakthrough, then I will also need to go through that feeling of being unanchored, where you're neither here nor there. Now, the previous year, and I shared this on the podcast, you'll hear it in the recording. The previous year, I chose the word grace. I was going through some pretty challenging times in terms of some of the stuff that was going on in my personal life. And so I chose grace as my word of the year, knowing that that was how I wanted to experience or to be when faced with the challenges that I was anticipating. And the shadow word for grace was surrender. In order to really embody grace, I needed to surrender myself to some of the challenges, to accept part of what was going to be going on around me. So for you, when you're choosing your word of the year for 2026, I'm going to invite you to do the same, to pick a word that is both aspirational and another word which is a companion word, a shadow word. So to give you the update on 2025, I would say it was a breakthrough year. Now, breakthrough will mean something different to everybody. And in my world, a breakthrough is going from a place where you feel stuck to becoming unstuck. And so what I was looking for last year and what I was seeking out were ways in which I could break through places where I was feeling stuck. And I will report that absolutely I experienced a number of breakthroughs over the course of 2025. Now, I wouldn't say that any single breakthrough was one of those breakthroughs that is totally life altering, but they were definitely life enhancing. And I will share maybe just a few examples, or I'll try to describe what that was like for me on a personal level. One of the breakthroughs that I experienced or that I created was something I've talked about already on the podcast, which was a trip to Paris that I took with my daughter and with my husband. And if you go back to that episode, there's a whole episode about the trip to Paris, then what you'll understand is that there were a number of factors in the decision-making process that had me stuck. Different desires by different family members, and that probably was the driving stuckness behind why we had not gone on this trip. My daughter and I had talked about it for years. My husband was on board. And so I talk in that episode about how we came to that decision and what I learned from the trip. And that was a breakthrough because that was a stuck point for me. That was a trip I'd wanted to take for years, but had kept on pushing off. And the breakthrough was making the decision and going, having the most amazing trip, and not only experiencing the pleasure of that trip with my daughter, with my husband, but also reconnecting with a part of myself that I'd kind of lost touch of. And that was really that inner Francophile, and rediscovering, reigniting the love that I have for the French culture in particular. I think it is the combination of structure and beauty and functionality and history and the richness of it all. It just lights me up. It makes me really feel alive. And so that was a breakthrough for me last year, or this year, 2025. It's still 2025 at the time that I am recording. I still have a month left in 2025, actually, at the time of recording. So there's another breakthrough that I'm cooking up, actually, even as we speak, that will set the tone for me in 2026. So that's kind of exciting. So there were personal breakthroughs, other breakthroughs that were of a personal nature. I would say that this is a year where I really got to know myself. And you hear people talk about that, and I think there are different stages of life. And this has certainly been one of them for me, where I've really questioned a lot of what I have believed over different stages of my life. Now, I'm 48 years old, and what that means is that I've had that many years to be influenced by other people's opinions, by what other people have told me, told people of my generation that we should do. There's been a lot of expectations, and I think this year was just one of those stages of life where I have been able to let a lot of that go, to really examine it, question it, and decide whether it's really for me, if it's relevant, if it's helpful. And I've let a lot of that go, and it's been quite freeing. So again, it's a breakthrough that probably nobody would notice except for me, but the freedom on the other side of it is tangible to me. It's palpable. I feel different as a result. I would also say that I've had breakthroughs on a professional level, and I've taken on projects this year that have stretched me, that have required me to move beyond my capacity when I took on the challenge relative to where I needed to be to execute. And that felt really good. And again, the breakthrough component there is to say yes and to then perform at a level that requires you to go through almost that messy middle, right? That period of not knowing, right? You make a decision and you don't know how it's going to turn out until that decision comes to fruition, the sort of result is delivered. you're in the middle, the messy middle. And so doing that professionally, taking on challenges, has required me to increase my tolerance. I'm going to talk about this in a minute, for the tension of being not yet there, but wanting to go there. I think also professionally, I've had a real aha moment. I've talked about that as well on the podcast, a crystallization of seeing where I'm at in my coaching practice and realizing, seeing patterns, seeing pockets, seeing there's themes in the work that I'm doing. And my goal next year is to really bring that out in my practice. And so these are all areas where I would say I have had breakthroughs. I would say these are very meaningful to me, not necessarily hugely apparent from the outside looking in, right? I think sometimes breakthrough, it's really great if we've got a before and after picture of a messy closet, and then a beautifully organized one juxtaposed right next to it. You can see tangibly the difference. These are breakthroughs that, okay, I've got some pretty good pictures from our trip to Paris, but really me a year ago and me today, if I look at the external snapshot, I don't know that it would look that different, but it feels different. So I would say that that has absolutely come to fruition, the breakthrough component of my year. Now, the shadow side I mentioned, that would be the idea of having to be unanchored. And so I have also gone through examples of that over the course of the year. So that has really required me to let go of old strategies, old beliefs, like I just talked about, and instead try new ones. And one of the things that I'm doing, and this I think I will continue to do, is weighing decisions and looking at how I would have made that decision previously. What were the considerations? And I still consider those things. But also the version of me that is different, if there was this breakthrough for me to be where I would like to be, what does that look like? And that question, when I answer it that way, what would I do differently, then guides the decision that I make. And that's quite fun. And you may have people in your life where you kind of do that. You ask them their opinion, or they offer their opinion, and you kind of know instinctively, okay, I should probably do the opposite. I'm kind of doing that with myself, right? I'm choosing a different direction on purpose because I'm very curious to see where that lands. So that's the breakthrough and the unanchored component. And, I think also in that unanchored category, it really is letting go, right? It's letting go of expectations. It's allowing myself to be in that tension place, that messy middle, and to increase my comfort with the discomfort there, knowing that there's so much possibility on the other side. So that brings me to 2026. And the word that I've chosen for this year is cherish. Now, I didn't spend a ton of time thinking about my word of the year this year. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I sit down and I write out a list. It's a word that really just came to me after a conversation that I had with somebody, and it kind of dropped onto my lap. And I was thinking about how there are moments where I really just want to feel cherished. And cherish to me is a really high level word. It's a high value word. And I know I'm not alone in wanting this, because I speak with friends, I speak with clients, I speak with people, and I can sense it. I know it. Deep down, so many of us want to feel valued. We want to feel appreciated. We want to feel seen. We want to feel heard. And to me, cherish is almost like the highest form of that. And when I started thinking about that word, I thought, okay, I want that. But if I'm honest with myself, am I really doing that, right? If I look at the people in my life, the people who are close to me, or people who maybe I want to be close to me, or if I think about my work, or I think about my health, or I think about my home, or I think about things that happen day to day that almost don't register, am I truly cherishing what is going on around me? Am I truly cherishing the people who are in my life? And if I'm really honest with myself, the answer is no, not at all to the level that I know that I am capable of, and not at all to the level that I could if I was really trying to do it, if I was trying harder, if I was trying to really cherish. So it seems like such a natural fit for the way I want to feel this year. I want to cherish me. I do. I want to really appreciate what I'm doing instead of dismissing myself or doing the thing and then moving on to the next. I do that. We all do. It's kind of normal. But what if there was just that extra pause, that extra level of validation, that extra level of care of self, and not just that? Really, that is the starting point. It's the cherishing of others too, right? It's the cherishing of the people close to me, the people who I want to have close to me, who maybe aren't yet close to me. Is cherishing my work. I love what I do. I love what I do. And so much of my mental space is thinking about the future and what I'm trying to create here. But what if I just slowed down and looked at what I do every day and really let it sink in? So 2026 for me is going to be a year where I really do take the time to cherish, to really explore what cherish means and to embody that. And so that is the aspirational component of what it will mean for me to cherish in 2026. And just like I didn't know what grace would mean when I picked it for 2024, or what breakthrough would amount to when I picked it for 2025, I don't know exactly what cherish is going to look like. I do have a pretty good idea of what I want to cherish already in terms of my personal life, in terms of my professional life. I do have ideas already, so I'm not going into it starting from zero, but I also don't know where this path is going to lead me. When cherish is the overarching theme, the word that I turn to in the moment, I don't yet know what that will become, but I'm really curious and happy to learn what that will be. Now, of course, there is the shadow word that I also want to choose. And when you listen to the recording of the original episode where I explain how to choose a word of the year, and I listened to that this morning, it really did help guide me toward picking this shadow word. Then what I can share here is that it was a bit of a tougher exercise, whereas cherish dropped on my lap without me even thinking about it. This was a bit of a tougher exercise because what would I have to do to cherish more fully, more intentionally? And thoughts that came to mind for me were, well, I should probably stop rushing through everything. I should probably stop focusing so much on the future, things that I want, things that I'm worried about. It probably means I should be more forgiving, right? If things aren't meeting all expectations, if they're not the way I think that they should be, then that's something that I need to let go of, maybe something I need to release, something I need to forgive. I explored the word forgiveness actually for two reasons. One, I love the concept of forgiving, but also there's a next layer of forgiveness that I learned about either last year or the year before. It is the idea that forgiving so deeply, or you can forgive so deeply that you almost let the concept of forgiveness itself evaporate. So it's almost as though, or it is such that you don't need to forgive because you believe that what the person did in the first place, assuming it's a person that you're forgiving, that they were just doing their best. They intended no harm. And so there really is nothing to forgive. And I can see how there's situations where that may not feel right, and maybe it doesn't even apply. But in a lot of cases, I think where we see the need for forgiveness, actually that person or that thing was just being itself, doing itself, being who they are, and coming from a good place. And so sometimes forgiveness means seeing that there was nothing that needed forgiveness in the first place. So I toyed with a lot of different words, but the word that I've settled on is presence. And the reason I've chosen presence is because to me, that encapsulates what I will need to fully embody in order to cherish. And for me, I think what would block me from cherishing a person or a moment or an accomplishment or a thing is because I would be blocked from that, because I would be wanting it to be different. I would be thinking, but in a year, it's going to be so much better. Maybe that person today isn't doing what I want them to, but I know in 5 years they will come around, or something like that, which is me not being present. That is me putting myself in the future and hoping things will be different there. To me, presence is not that. Presence is being in the moment and being able to cherish and love the thing that is happening in real time that is in front of me, without having to time travel mentally or to physically remove myself from the situation and say, well, I'm just not going to do this right now. It is truly being present. And so it means listening with full capacity. It means appreciating a moment for what it is, not what it could be. And so that is my shadow word for 2026. So when I find myself having a hard time cherishing whatever it is I'm trying to cherish, whether it's a person, a situation, whether it's something about myself, it is that presence. It is that willingness to be present in the moment, not rushing, simply just being there and allowing for whatever is. Now, obviously, there are limits. I'm not talking about a situation where harm is imminent or something like that. No, this is just thinking about those moments where maybe it is something I would normally overlook or take for granted, and instead I want to be present with it. So those are my thoughts on my word of the year. And now I'm going to share with you the recording of the instructions so that you can create your word of the year for 2026. And I would encourage you to think about what you want for your year, what theme you would love to experience this year, what aspirational word will guide you through difficult decisions and also when presented with beautiful opportunities. So without further ado, I'm going to invite you to choose your word or words of the year. And I'm going to then say goodbye for the year. And next time we connect, it will be 2026. And I will be cherishing at a whole new level the conversations that we have, the relationship that we have. And I'm just so excited to bring that energy into the new year and to see what you choose to bring for your year. If setting a word of the year is something that is new to you, then you are absolutely in the right place. But even if you typically do this, and even if you've already done this for the year, you're still in the right place, because we're going to talk about the traditional approach to choosing a word of the year. And I'm also going to offer a little twist on that, which I think will help you to fully embody and encapsulate the word that you choose for yourself and increase your likelihood of achieving the kind of success that you want for yourself this year. Now, if this is new to you, then it may help for me to explain what choosing a word of the year typically involves. The usual process is that you think about something that you want to create in the year. It might be a goal that you have for yourself, a decision that you're looking to make, and you then set for yourself a vision of what kind of energy you want to possess in the pursuit of that goal. Or maybe it's a word that describes the process to you. And so typically you're picking something that is aspirational. You might pick the word decisive or courageous or determined or grounded or perseverant or elegant. So that is typically the process in a very quick summary of choosing a word of the year. And I've done this for the past 5 or 6 years, ever since I started my coaching practice, actually. And my daughter has also started doing this. So last year was her first year of picking a word of the year, and we're going through that process again for this year. And a conversation that she and I had the other day has inspired me to share this work with you and to offer a word of the year process that involves a twist. And the twist is counterintuitive and perhaps not what you would expect, but it stems from a conversation that we had about our words of the year. And we were there discussing things like perseverance and determination and elegance, words that are aspirational. And we were talking about how choosing such a word would really set the tone for the year ahead. And somehow we got into joking about words that we would never want to pick for a word of the year. Things like fear or anxiety or doubt. And it got us to thinking that that would set a completely different train of events throughout the course of your year. And we kind of dropped the subject and moved on and started talking about other things. But the next day, I had this aha moment where I decided that actually picking a counterintuitive word of the year wasn't as crazy as it first sounded. And in fact, it can help you to achieve your aspirational word of the year. So stay tuned. I'm going to dive into that a little bit later in this podcast episode. First, we're going to focus on choosing your word of the year. So what do you normally do when you choose a word of the year? Well, it's a fairly simple process. Again, it goes back to thinking about what it is that you want to create this year and then picking a goal or a word that reflects that goal for you. Now, I've done this for several years, as I mentioned, so I'm going to share some examples of words of the year that I've picked in the past and invite you to think about how this relates to you and your practice and what word or words resonate with you. So one word that I chose for my practice, or for my year, I should say, very early in my coaching practice was the word decisive. I chose that word because what I found was that in starting my own coaching practice, I was all of a sudden faced with way more decisions than I ever faced when I was practicing as a lawyer, as an employee. So you can imagine I'd switched fields from law to coaching, and I'd gone from being employed where I received a paycheck every 2 weeks. It was very convenient, to having to build a practice from scratch. And there were a number of choices I need to make. And so I realized that being decisive was something I really needed to develop that year. Choices that I needed to make included, do I continue to practice as a lawyer while I'm building my coaching practice? Do I work in-house as a coach, or do I set up a business on my own? Do I keep my license as a lawyer after I had established my coaching practice? That was a decision I made maybe a year or so into my practice. And so there were a number of decisions that I needed to make. And to make those decisions, what I wanted to do was to embody decisiveness. That was my goal. That was my word for the year. Now, this is a word that you may be able to relate to. I work with a number of lawyers who come to me because they want help making a decision and executing on a decision. And you might find yourself at that stage where you are really struggling to make a choice. You're in the doldrums almost, where you're toying with one idea. Maybe you're in a job that you like, but you don't love. You are content, you're comfortable, but you don't see yourself being there 5 years from now. And so you might have this ongoing question, this decision that keeps floating to the surface that you keep kind of dismissing. And so you might decide that this is the year that you want to make a decision one way or another. Either you're going to accept where you are and love it for what it is, or you're going to make a choice to move on. You may be in a firm, for example, where you've got different options available to you. Some firms have, the up and out partner or find something else type of model. And increasingly, firms are offering alternative routes where you don't necessarily need to become a partner to stay in your firm for the longer term. And so you might be asking yourself whether partnership aligns with your goals, your professional career goals, and your life goals, or whether one of these alternative paths would be better suited for you. You might be in a law firm thinking about whether or not in-house would be an option for you, whether that's something that you would like to pursue. Or you may already be in-house and you're thinking about going to a different in-house position, or maybe even back into private practice. There are so many different choices that may be on your plate right now. And so decisiveness, making a decision, might be something that you want to make a goal for yourself, a theme for yourself over the course of the year. And of course, if you choose a word like decisive, it may be because you're looking to make one very significant decision. But what you'll find is when you set that goal, when you set that word, all of a sudden you become so much more attuned to all of the decisions that you're making, and you can develop that decision-making muscle as you go through your days. Now, another word that I chose in a previous year was resonance. This was a few years into my coaching practice, and what I started to notice was that there were things in my professional work that I found really fulfilling, where I felt a strong degree of resonance, and other aspects of my practice that I felt were not quite as aligned. And so resonance was the word that I chose for that year, because what I wanted to do was position myself so that I would increasingly work with the types of lawyers and clients that I really wanted to work with, and move myself away from some of the projects that I was working on that weren't quite as aligned with what I wanted to create. Now, this might resonate with you because a lot of lawyers that I work with find they reach a point in their practice where they're no longer feeling fulfilled. They're no longer feeling connected to their colleagues, to their work, to their community. And so the exercise there becomes finding what resonates for you and taking active steps toward those things. So that might be a word that resonates for you in deciding on your word of the year for 2024. Another word that I chose was streamline. This was a couple of years ago where I wanted to improve my systems. I wanted to streamline my processes. I also, again, wanted to move more toward things that resonated with me and let go of things that did not resonate. So that might align with you in your practice. You might find that you've just had a really intense year in 2023, that there was a lot going on, a lot of projects. You may have felt overwhelmed at times. You may have found that you were feeling burnt out toward the end of the year. Maybe you're feeling burnt out right now. And so by streamlining, you might be able to set a benchmark for yourself where you start asking yourself those questions. How can I do this more effectively? How can I build a team to support me? How can I develop systems so that this can be more smooth, more effective? How can I manage my days and my time better so that I'm more streamlined? So the word that I picked last year was magnetic, and that was a super fun word. You can tell there's kind of a theme here, right? The words that I'm picking are evolving as my professional work is evolving, and so your words too are going to evolve. The magnetic word for me was a choice because what I really wanted to do last year was attract into my world the types of lawyers that I really wanted to work with, the types of opportunities and projects that really aligned with what I wanted to do. And also I wanted the magnetic component to apply to my personal life, right? To really attract to me the people who I wanted most in my personal life. And there is overlap for me in both of those areas. My personal and professional relationships are often one and the same. And so this focus on magnetic was really interesting because what I found was I was able to do that. I was able to bring into my world so many incredible individuals, and I'm reflecting on it now and so grateful for that process, not only for the people, and there are some really amazing people that managed to find me, that I managed to find them, and also some of the projects that I was involved in that were really fulfilling. And so again, that might be a word that resonates with you. You might choose the word magnetic, thinking of how do you want to align yourself to bring in more of what you want, to have those opportunities flow to you organically because of who you're being as a professional. Now, that is the aspirational process, the aspirational part of choosing a word of the year. It's choosing a word that follows a theme, that allows you to reach a goal that you have set for yourself, that aligns with a vision that you've created. But there is a limit to the aspirational process, and that is this. When you choose a goal like that for yourself, when you choose a word, and then you find that you're not always able to encapsulate that word, and believe me, there were times where I was not streamlined, I was not decisive, I was not resonating, and I was not feeling magnetic, then sometimes that can leave you feeling like maybe something has gone wrong. You might then feel a little bit frustrated. You might feel a little bit of resistance. You might feel like you're failing at it. And sometimes you can give up on your word. And I mean, that makes sense, right? When we set a big goal and it's fresh and it's new and it's exciting and we've got all the endorphins keeping us activated and excited about a project, it's easy to stay connected to it. But once you hit June, if you're not really feeling that connection anymore, you can lose sight of your word and let it drift and kind of forget about it. And so what I'd invite you to think about is how you can approach this exercise in a way that will keep your connection to your word alive throughout the year. And this is where that conversation with my daughter comes back into play. The idea that you could actually pick a word that is something that you don't think that you would want to have in your practice, in your personal life, in your professional life, and yet by choosing a word like that, you can actually strengthen your commitment to your aspirational word and actually create something more than you would if you simply had that aspirational component to it. So what I'm going to do is offer a 2-step process to choosing your word of the year. And that first step is going to be the aspirational component. And that second step is going to be choosing a companion word. So let's go back to step 1, choosing a word of the year. So this is where I would invite you to think about the examples that I've just shared with you and think about goals that you've set for your practice. Now, if you are a listener to this podcast and you've been following for the last few weeks, chances are you've got some clarity around what it is that you want to create in 2024. A couple of weeks ago, I produced a podcast. It was a recording of a workshop that I did back in December about creating sustainable success in 2024. And that episode walks you through a process. If you haven't listened to it, by all means, go back and listen to it. Have a pen and paper handy because there are 10 prompts in that discussion that will help you to take inventory of what you achieved over 2023 and then set up a plan for yourself for 2024. Now, last week's episode was creating a business plan for lawyers, and I offer 5 different categories that you can use when setting up your business plan. So if you've done those 2 episodes, the work that is set out in those 2 episodes, you have a pretty clear idea now about what you want to do going forward into 2024. And so this is your invitation to pick a word of the year that can guide you in the execution of the plans that you've set for yourself. So think about what you want to do this year. This is thinking about goals that you have. Maybe it's a decision that you need to make. Maybe it's a challenge that you anticipate. Sometimes you can head into a year and your calendar is already full. You've got trials, you've got closings, you've got speaking engagements, you've got student recruitment, you've got travel plans. So you might look at your calendar and already think, how am I going to get all of this done? So you can already anticipate some of the challenges that you're having. You might be looking at your year ahead and thinking, you know what, there's something missing here. I know that I need to bring in more of something, whether that's bringing in more professional relationships. You feel a little bit lonely in your practice. Maybe you had a really busy year last year and you let some of your relationships slide. So this might be an opportunity to rekindle some of those connections. It might be a time to seek out new relationships. You might be wanting to bring in more marketing of your work. You might find that your practice is steady, but you want it to grow. And so you might want to do some proactive marketing to increase the flow of work that aligns with what it is that you're trying to create. You might find that there are other components that you want to bring into your life that have nothing to do with work. You might want more time with your family. You might want to travel to a far off destination. Maybe you haven't really done that since we've slowly eked our way out of the pandemic. So you might think about that quite strategically, and you might think about things that you want to let go of in your practice. If you find that you are overwhelmed, that there are committees that you've joined where you no longer understand why you're there. You said yes many years ago, and now you're still there thinking, wait a second, this no longer aligns with what I'm trying to accomplish in my practice. So this is your invitation to think about what you want in this calendar year in 2024. And then you would ask yourself what words come to mind when you think about those things. So I'm going to offer some words. Again, I encourage you to think of your own words. Go to the thesaurus, go to the dictionary, go to the internet and start Googling. I mean, you never know what you're going to find, but some of the words that I'd invite you to start thinking about that might percolate and resonate or give inspiration for other words might be determined, it might be decisive, courageous, persistent, grace, willing, abundant, magnetic, streamline, release, reinvent. These are all words that you might have as aspirational words that will help you to frame your actions, that'll give you that guiding light that you can follow when you are making choices and when you are conducting yourself day to day. Now, you can start by making a short list. You might narrow it down to 3 to 5 words that all kind of seem like they could work for you. And then from that list, I would invite you to pick the word that resonates the most strongly with you. And in a moment, I'm going to be sharing my word of the year with you, along with its companion word. So that was step 1, is to select your word. Now, step 2 is this twist that I've been talking about. It's the idea of choosing a companion word. Now, if we go back to that conversation with my daughter and the idea of picking a word like fear or doubt, or anxiety. And having that be your word of the year and imagining what your word would look like if that was the overarching theme, it does seem counterintuitive. Why would you ever want to set yourself up for an anxious or fearful year? And yet, I would offer that we do want to choose a companion word. When you pick an aspirational word, which is what you just did in that exercise, right? Whether it's courageous or elegant or determined, chances are there is a gap between where you are right now and where you see yourself when fully embodying that word. So, for example, if you're a really organized person, my guess is you're not going to pick organized as your word of the year because that's something that already is present in your life. There's not really much that is aspirational about that. There's not really any growth in that word for you. That being said, if you were to choose the word decisive as your word of the year, and you are presently in a decision fork, let's say that you are going back to that example of being in a job, right? You're in a job, it's okay, you don't love it, but you like it enough, and you know that it's comfortable, but you don't really see yourself there in the long run, then you have a decision ahead of you. Do you stay or do you go? And you can look at it from different options. But in order to make that decision, you're going to need to be decisive. And if you haven't made that decision yet, there's a reason. There's something that is holding you back. And it might be the fear of the unknown. It might be the fear of making the wrong decision. And what I'm offering here then is that when you pick your aspirational word and there's a gap between where you are now and where you want to be, there's something that stands in the way. And so we want to figure out what is standing in the way, and we can name that as your companion word because that's the work that you're going to be doing over the course of the year in order for you to fully encapsulate that aspirational word of the year. So again, let's go back to decisive as an example. If you choose to be decisive, if you choose to leave your job, even though it's comfortable, in order to try something that you think is going to be better for you in the long run, you are going to need to give up one job for another. You're going to need to give up something that is predictable in order to have the possibility of something better. You will need to take a risk without a guarantee of success. So you can see how in order to achieve decisiveness, you're going to have to go through something very uncomfortable. So going back to this process then, take that word that you've chosen for yourself, whether it's elegant or courage, determination, success. I mean, there's all these words that you may have chosen for yourself. So imagine what that word is, and then ask yourself what challenge is standing between you and fully embracing that word of the year. Now, I'll give you some examples. Again, this might help you figure out what word would be suitable for you. But let's think about this. So if decisive is the word that you want, that may mean that you need to embrace a willingness to fail. So the companion word that you might choose might be failure. You are going to choose to be decisive. And what that means is that you're going to have to embrace failure in your life, or at least the possibility of failure. If you choose determined, for example, that means that you're going to be determined and taking action toward a goal, regardless of whether or not you can see the success right away. So you might be needing to overcome feelings of self-doubt, right? You're determined to make it happen. You've never done it before. You may have a lot of self-doubt that comes along with that, and yet you're going to choose to move forward anyways. You might feel judgment if you're determined to do something and you're concerned about what others are going to think about you, especially if you're not successful. It may mean that being determined means a willingness to be judged. It may also mean that you need to develop a comfort with uncertainty. You're determined to make it happen, but you don't yet know what the plan is or what exact steps are going to be required. You're going to have to embrace uncertainty. So if your aspirational word is determined, then you might have to pick as a companion something like self-doubt, judgment, or uncertainty. So hopefully you're seeing how this game works and you're starting to have ideas for yourself of what kind of words come up for you as those limiting words. Another word, resonance. So if resonance is the aspirational word that you've chosen, there are companion words that go along with that, right? It's a willingness to let go, a willingness to follow your gut, a willingness to potentially be wrong. So think about what word would encapsulate almost the opposite of resonance, that thing that you need to overcome in order to fully embrace resonance as your word of the year. And then finally, the last example I'll share here is streamline. So if you choose a word streamline or something like it for your word of the year, what is it that is standing between you here today and that more streamlined version of yourself? It may mean that you need to be willing to feel loss, right? The loss of letting things go. It might mean feeling that fear of missing out, that FOMO. So you get to decide for yourself what it is that is going to come up for you as an obstacle in your journey to trying to embody your word of the year. So I mentioned that I was going to share my word of the year and its companion. And so the word that I chose for this year, there was actually a number of different contenders. I was first looking at the word elevate. This is a few months ago. I thought, oh, that would be a good word. Refine was another word that was on my list of contenders. Trim was another word, some sort of like streamline, kind of trimming the excess. Trust was another contender. Love was another contender. And the word that I'm almost certainly going to go ahead with this year after going through a number of different options as described is grace. And there are two reasons why I'm choosing the word grace this year. Number one is that I feel like in the last year, the last calendar year, there was more reactivity in my practice and in my life than I want to have, right? If there's a spectrum, I was a little bit more on the reactive side of the spectrum than is desired for me. And so part of my work this year then is to more fully encapsulate this notion of grace. And what that means to me is to be steady, to feel grounded, to be able to navigate myself with the ebbs and flows of practice and of life almost above the fray, right? That to me is what grace really means. And I feel like this is a year where I want to step into that feeling, to step into a more graceful way of practicing and way of being. And the other thing that I love about the word grace is that there's an element of grace that goes beyond what we can plan for, right? There's, as you know, I love planning. It gets me really excited. I love planning my days. I love planning podcasts. I love planning my year. I love planning trips. To me, there's so much satisfaction and joy that comes out of just sitting down and I want to use the word imaginating. I know it isn't an actual word, but it sounds so satisfying. Imaginating. I want to imaginate what I want my year to look like, what I want something to look like. Because I feel like imagine isn't enough. It's like imagination plus putting your imagination to a practical purpose, right? You actually turn the vision into reality. That to me is one of the most satisfying things that you can do. So getting back to grace, I know there's so much in my practice and in my life that I can orchestrate, that I can plan for, that I can effectively control through the method of planning. And yet there's this force in life, right? In practice and in life that is beyond what we can articulate and put down on paper as a plan, right? There's this idea that you put yourself out there and the things that you never could have planned for yourself will find you. They will find their way toward you. And sometimes those things that find their way toward you are exactly what you wanted. They're better than you ever could have dreamed of. And those elements of grace are so easy to accept and incorporate into your day to day, your life. And at the same time, there are aspects of your life that will also find you that are not as invited, right? These are the components of life where you didn't see it coming and you never would have wished it for yourself or for anybody else. And yet there it is. And it's something that you need to somehow manage. And so when I think of grace, it is the ability to have both of those components of your life, right? The unplanned, I'm thinking about the unplanned components of your life, some of which are magical in a positive way, and some of which are so challenging. And so for grace, for me in the year to come, it is being able to, number one, encapsulate that first definition of grace, right? To be able to navigate life with that sense of purpose and calm and ease. And at the same time, being able to accept the things that come my way in a fluid and flexible manner. So you might think about what word resonates with you that has some meaning for you in relation to how your last year has gone and what you want to create for the next year that's a little bit different for you. Now, I mentioned that the aspirational word, brings up something that is a challenge for you. And so when I think about grace and what challenge arises for me when I aspire to greater grace in my life, in my practice, I think it really is that notion of flexibility. It's that notion of maintaining composure when I really don't feel composed. And the words that came to me that would be the most challenging are accepting or allowing. And what I'm thinking about accepting is accepting those difficult parts, right? The really difficult parts that you don't see coming, the last minute changes, when things don't go your way, the difficulty of potential failure or actual failure. So it's inviting almost that fluidity, or inviting the unknown. And the word that I ultimately settled on, so I thought about accepting, inviting, welcoming, allowing. But to me, the word that resonates most strongly as the companion word is surrender, right? It's this idea that in order to fully embody the grace that I want to embody in my 2024 calendar year, it means I need to surrender. And so I'll have a chance over the course of the year to have that happen in action, where I'll be in the moment. And in order to choose grace, it means I'm going to have to surrender. And so you might think about for yourself, what are some of the challenges that you're anticipating, and what words would help you describe that? And of all of those words, which one is the one that resonates most strongly for you? So I feel pretty solid in my choice that grace is that aspirational word. And what that means is that I will need to surrender in ways that I don't even know yet. Maybe we'll revisit this at the end of 2024. I can maybe do a follow-up podcast and let you know how it unfolded for me. And by all means, please do share with me how this is unfolding for you. Let me know what words you choose, and let me know how it influences you over the course of the year. Now, one more note on that companion word is that I really invite you to explore some of the words that feel most difficult for you. Some of the words that came to mind for me while I was preparing for today: waste. That might be something that feels really uncomfortable for you. So maybe that's a word that you choose. Other common things that we often would love to just avoid: shame, failure, ridicule, judgment, scorn, and loneliness. And so these are all words that you can identify as companion words. And the reason for doing that, again, isn't because you want to have a year where all you do is endure judgment and scorn and shame from others. It's rather that when you can allow yourself to experience the difficulty, right? When you can invite that difficult experience, when you can allow for that, when you can surrender, then it creates a freedom for you in your practice, because you now know that in order to reach that aspirational word, in order for me to reach that grace that I'm looking for, it means I need to learn how to better manage surrendering. And so by developing the surrendering muscle for me, and for you, it will be something different. By developing that muscle, you move yourself closer to what it is that you are aspiring to. Now, the reason that this is an effective strategy is because when you are willing to choose difficulty, to allow for those difficult experiences as the cost of realizing your goals, then you gain the freedom to move forward no matter what it is that you're feeling. So, for example, let's say you choose the word freedom as your aspirational word of the year. And you decide that if you're going to reach toward freedom, the most difficult thing for you would be to feel trapped. And so you choose that as your companion word, that you're willing to feel trapped in order to find freedom. What you'll find is that instantly you already have greater freedom. And the freedom there is that you are now free from the dread, the resistance, the denial, or avoidance of feeling trapped, because you've already anticipated it and you've already allowed for it. And when you choose a companion word alongside your aspirational word, you're then better able to manage your expectations. You can normalize the difficulty that comes along with pursuing your goals, with trying to encapsulate that aspirational word. And you're able to anticipate some of the problems that you'll have ahead of time and then plan for them. And you don't need to embody your word of the year all of the time in order to get closer to it. And in fact, I think the opposite is almost true. The more time you spend in that companion word, the more time I spend surrendering, the easier it is and the closer I will get to that feeling of grace. So the skills that you'll need then to create your word of the year and its companion word are very, very simple. And the first thing, of course, is to reflect on what it is that you want for this year, for this calendar year of 2024. Then you're going to pick an aspirational word to help guide you. You can do that by writing out a list of words, narrowing down that list, and then picking the one that feels most connected for you, the one that resonates most strongly, that you feel engaged in and energized by. And then you're going to pick a companion word, one that is a word that maybe you think that you would want to avoid, that intuitively you would not pick as your word of the year. Maybe it's the complete opposite of the word that you picked. And you're going to embrace that word. You're going to make that part of your year's trajectory, because we already know ahead of time that you're going to have moments where everything goes your way and you're going to have moments where nothing seems right. And so we're already forecasting that and giving you the option of allowing that as part of your path toward reaching your goals. So when you choose your aspirational word and its companion, you've now set your GPS to signal that you're on the right path. And whether you are in your aspirational word energy, whether you're feeling elegant, whether you're feeling productive, whether you're feeling decisive, or if you're spending time in the companion word, right? Maybe it's you're feeling vulnerable, or you're feeling like you're close to failure, or you are failing, or you're feeling anxiety, or you're feeling that you need to surrender. That time that you spend in either of those emotional states, in either of those feeling states, you are still getting closer to where you want to be. And as you learn to manage the difficult components of your companion word, what you'll find is that you increase your strength, you increase your resilience, and you close that gap between where you are currently and where you want to be in relation to your aspirational word. So that, my friends, is what I have for you today. I hope that over the course of today's episode, you have managed to choose a word for yourself that inspires you and a companion word that allows you to weather through the more difficult parts of getting closer to where you want to be. And for all of you, I just wanted to thank you again for joining me in this podcast. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be able to serve in this way. If you enjoy this podcast, please do provide a rating and review. It helps me know that I'm on the right track. It helps other lawyers find this podcast. And so wherever it is that you're listening, I really would appreciate that this year. So my dear, dear friend, I hope you have now set yourself up and you're ready for 2024. And if you have any questions, or if you would like my support to help you this year with whatever it is that you are aspiring to, by all means, please do feel free to reach out. Bye for now. See you next week. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.